to present to you Qatar's experience, its detailed vision, and the efforts it has undertaken in order to live up to its obligations and to promote human rights for its people and for those residing in our country. I would like to take this opportunity to reaffirm that our country places strengthening and protecting human rights as a top priority. It is a key part of our overall reform efforts. Our cooperation with the Human Rights Council and all of its mechanisms, in particular the UPR, and is something that we consider to be essential and which completes our domestic level efforts to protect and promote human rights. I would also like to take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all those countries who took part in the review of my country, contributing in an objective spirit and making constructive and significant recommendations. I would like to thank Chile, the Maldives and Sudan for their efforts to facilitate the UPR process in their capacity as members of the Troika. President, during this fourth review, Qatar received 317 recommendations, which we have very carefully considered from an objective standpoint. And we have considered that our human rights commitments and the instruments to which we have adhered, as well as the cultural and societal specificities of our country. International charters underscored the importance of taking these specificities into account when undertaking efforts to strengthen human rights. We have accepted 245 recommendations and noted 72. We would like to specify in this regard that a large number of those recommendations have effectively been implemented already. Our view is that we have undertaken measures in the past, and these are currently being implemented, and we will take further measures in order to implement the recommendations accepted under the fourth cycle, and we will do so objectively. President, allow me to comment a number of questions and recommendations that came up during our review. Regarding the recommendations to accede to international conventions, my country is a party to fundamental human rights conventions, in particular 9 conventions, as well as several protocols relating to those conventions. We submit periodic reports under these conventions in a systematic fashion, and we implement our commitments at the national level. Accession to any new convention must take part in the context of a comprehensive process that looks at all the necessary aspects, including the legislative, institutional and executive measures required for us to truly honour our obligations that would stem from such an accession. We also look at measures to be taken at the national level, and that is why we have accepted a number of recommendations and we have taken note of others. Regarding the recommendation on abolishing the death penalty, we would like to say here that there is no international consensus on the abolition of the death penalty. It is something that goes hand in hand with the guarantees for a fair trial, and this has been underscored by several UN resolutions. The decision to use the death penalty is a sovereign decision that must be taken in respect of international law and in respect of the sovereign right of states to develop their own legal regime and to define the necessary punishments in accordance with its obligations under international law. The death penalty in Qatar is used very rarely, and it is limited to extremely dangerous crimes, and takes place after a fair trial is held. And very often, a death sentence is changed to a lighter sentence. Regarding forced labour, we would like to say that we are committed to undertaking all necessary reforms at the legislative and political level in order to address the issue of foreign workers, and this in accordance with international standards. These reforms have made significant headway so far, and they have helped improve conditions at work, in particular through measures such as a minimum wage. We have been fighting against forced labour and trafficking, and we have emphasised the need to respect the right to health, especially given the high temperatures in Qatar. We have also signed an agreement to extend the joint working programme for 4 additional years in order to further develop our policies on the workforce and in order to modernise labour market criteria and exchange best practices and expertise. Regarding domestic workers, all reforms are applicable to this category. We have enacted a law on domestic workers. The maximum working hours have been set, and sick leave has been stipulated as well, and this pursuant to ILO Convention 189 on decent work for domestic workers. We have adopted an updated version of our labour contracts, and this was in 2021. The new version has been communicated with countries from where we receive foreign workers, and we have also raised awareness among domestic workers as to their legal rights, and we have also worked on awareness raising with agencies that are involved in finding domestic workers from abroad. We set great store by the family, which we consider to be the fundamental kernel of our society. Families must be protected by the state as recommended by various human rights conventions. Through our legislation, we strive to strengthen the role of the family, and the Ministry for the Family and Social Issues has taken measures to strengthen the role of the family with a view to building a robust and resilient society. This chart underscores the rights and duties of family members and seeks to establish fair relations. The Charter also takes into consideration the economic and financial rights of family members and the protection of women and children's rights and the strengthening of justice and mutual respect within the family. We have also received recommendations on women, older persons and persons with disabilities and children. Regarding women, we have ensured empowerment across all sectors, and this in keeping with our vision for 2030 in order to strengthen women's role in all areas of life, in particular in education, healthcare and participation in economic, social and political decision-making. This has led to very fruitful results. The rate of girls' school enrollment reached 88% in 2023-2024. 67.1% of university-level students are women, and this also for 2023-2024. The participation rate of women on the labour market has reached 49%, and 72% of women have been employed. In diplomacy, the number of women diplomats has increased. We have women holding various key positions, in particular within the Qatari delegation here and in New York. We have strengthened the rights of older persons, putting them on an equal footing with other categories, and these measures are now part of our relevant laws. We are completing legislative measures regarding the Act on Children and the Act on Persons with Disabilities. And we are ensuring that all safeguards foreseen by international conventions are reflected. Regarding strengthening international cooperation, we have been continuing our cooperation with our friendly states and international institutions, and we have contributed to efforts to achieve development. We have assisted developing countries and least developed countries in their efforts to achieve the 2030 goals. We have placed an emphasis on crucial sectors such as healthcare, education, water, and the provision of humanitarian aid in the context of natural disasters, armed conflicts, and pandemics. We attach particular significance to dialogue through diplomacy and mediation and the facilitation of negotiations. Our efforts seek to bring about peace and stability through settlements for various international disputes in a peaceful fashion, and we have achieved great success at the regional and also international level in this regard. I would like to thank you once again, President.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. In accordance with paragraph 13 of the Annex of Resolution 1621 of the Human Rights Council, I'd like to give the floor to the National Human Rights Commission of Qatar.
صباح الخير جميعا باسم اللجنة الوطنية.
Thank you. And good morning to everybody. On behalf of the National Human Rights Institution of Qatar, I would like to thank the Human Rights Council, the Troika, and all states who participated and made fruitful recommendations for us. We have made significant progress in recent years in the field of human rights, and this has been reflected in various initiatives, including in sectors such as education, healthcare, and sustainable development. The country places particular emphasis on vulnerable groups, thus reaffirming its commitment to ensuring the well-being of all citizens and residents. But despite this progress, there are some areas that require further attention. We recommend adopting the draft law on the regulation of media activities, which would be a step forward in order to guarantee freedom of expression. We also urge the swift adoption of the draft law on children's rights and the draft law on the rights of persons with disabilities, both of which are still under consideration. We believe that the promotion of human rights is an ongoing process, and Qatar is firmly treading along that path with determination and dedication, and we hope that the state will continue to implement reforms that enhance the protection and empowerment of our citizens, reflecting its unwavering commitment to human rights at all levels. Thank you.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I will now be giving the floor to member states and observer states for their comments about the final documents of the review. The speaking time is 1 minute 30 seconds for all states, and I would like to begin by giving the floor to the distinguished representative of Jordan. Thank you, President. I would like to welcome the state of Qatar. We thank them for the update. We commend Qatar's constructive cooperation with all Human Rights Council mechanisms, as well as their commitment to protecting and promoting human rights. This is an example to be followed for a better future and for the proper implementation of plans that meet the aspirations of this noble people. We thank Qatar for having accepted our recommendations on medical care, quality medical care, and women's empowerment by supporting their participation in all sectors and increasing the number of education and rehabilitation programs for persons with disabilities. To conclude, we hope that Qatar will manage to achieve its goals, and we wish them further progress and prosperity and recommend the adoption of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kuwait.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. يرحب.
Thank you, President. A cordial welcome to the delegation of the sister state of Qatar. We thank them for the information presented. Regarding the recommendations made, we commend the acceptation by Qatar of a significant number of recommendations including the 2 recommendations submitted by my country calling for national human rights mechanisms to continue proposing measures aimed at protecting and promoting human rights, as well as the recommendation aimed at fine-tuning the National Development Strategy 2024-2030. We commend measures taken by Qatar to reform the legislative and judicial branches, as well as the environment and the family sectors. We commend measures taken regarding women's empowerment, domestic workers and the empowerment of women and promotion of healthcare. We wish Qatar every success in the implementation of the recommendations it has accepted and recommend the adoption of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Lao People's Democratic Republic.
Mr. President, my delegation congratulates Qatar on the successful participation in the constructive dialogue in its 4th UPR cycle. The Lao PDR commends the significant efforts made by Qatar in advancing human rights, improving the well-being, and promoting gender equality and empowerment in the country through the implementation of the National Vision 2030. My delegations appreciate Qatar for accepting the majority of recommendations received during the constructive dialogue, including the 2 recommendations made by the Lao PDR. We wish Qatar every success in implementing the accepted recommendations. In conclusion, we support the adoption of the UPR outcome of Qatar by consensus. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lesotho.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lesotho extends a warm welcome to the delegation of Qatar to adoption of the 4th UPR cycle. We recognize Qatar for their positive engagement throughout the UPR process and support for a substantial number of the recommendations made to them, including all of the recommendations offered by Lesotho. Qatar's commitment to multilateral cooperation is evident through the Qatar Fund for Development, which has played a critical role in supporting development projects in over 50 locations. We applaud Qatar's active contribution to humanitarian and human rights efforts around the world. Additionally, Lesotho acknowledges Qatar's initiatives to empower women, including by supporting female entrepreneurs, investing in educational programs, and providing rehabilitation for victims of domestic violence. My delegation is encouraged by the increased participation of women in decision-making roles within Qatar's economic and political sectors, among other achievements. In closing, Lesotho wishes the government of Qatar every success with implementing their accepted recommendations. We recommend the Council to adopt this 4th cycle of the report. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au...
Thank you. I call on Libya.
شكرا السيد الرئيس.
Thank you, President. We would like to welcome the delegation of Qatar, a brotherly state, and we commend Qatar's cooperation with the various human rights mechanisms. We also commend key measures taken in favour of human rights. We have taken note of the report by the working group, and we welcome the acceptance by Qatar of Libya's recommendations. By way of conclusion, we recommend that the Council adopt the report, and we wish Qatar every success. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Madagascar on the list. I don't think they're in the room. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Malaysia.
Mr. President, Malaysia thanks the Qatari delegation for its constructive engagement and congratulates Qatar on the successful outcomes of its UPR session held on 12 November 2024. Malaysia commends Qatar for supporting most of the recommendations received, including all 3 recommendations made by Malaysia. These recommendations encompass the promotions of gender equality and women's empowerment, employment opportunities for PWDs, and access to healthcare services for all. Malaysia acknowledges Qatar's reaffirmations that human rights have become a constant strategic priority and that their protection is a key element of state building and support for good governance. Finally, Malaysia recommends the Council to adopt the outcome of Qatar's UPR review by consensus and wishes Qatar success in implementing the accepted recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Maldives.
The Maldives warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation from the State of Qatar to the adoption of the UPR outcome report and appreciates their commitment to the UPR process. The Maldives commends the State of Qatar for accepting majority of the recommendations received during the UPR process, including 2 recommendations made by the Maldives. We wish the State of Qatar every success in the implementation of the accepted recommendation and request the Council to adopt the UPR report by consensus. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne...
Thank you. I call on the distinguished representative of Mauritania. Thank you, President. We would like to welcome Qatar's continued efforts for the reassessment of its legislative and political framework. We commend the efforts undertaken during the period under review, which seek to further promote human rights. We are glad that Qatar continues to adopt national strategies that contribute to the attainment of Qatar's National Vision 2020-2030. We also commend Qatar's launching of its 3rd National Development Strategy 2024-2030. We recommend that the Council adopt the report and wish every success to Qatar in the implementation of the accepted recommendations and of its human rights policies. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I call on Morocco.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, President. The Kingdom of Morocco would like to welcome Qatar. We welcome its positive cooperation with the UPR. We commend efforts made to promote human rights, and we also look favorably upon the approval by Qatar of recommendations made regarding strengthening efforts to protect and promote human rights, to achieve development and promote awareness raising about information and capacity building through the implementation of the national strategy for 2024-2030 in order to achieve sustainable development. We also commend Qatar's commitment to women's empowerment and the protection of women from all forms of violence and efforts that are made to ensure a safer environment. Finally, Morocco supports the adoption of the final report of the UPR, and we wish Qatar every success in the implementation of the recommendations accepted. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nepal.
Mr. President, Nepal welcomes the delegation of the State of Qatar to the adoption of the UPR outcome and thanks them for the constructive engagement with human rights mechanisms. We thank Qatar for accepting 2 out of the 3 recommendations we provided. We appreciate the progress made by Qatar in enhancing women's participation in decision-making bodies. Nepal wishes Qatar all success in implementing the accepted recommendations and supports the adoption of the UPR outcome report by consensus. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Oman.
شكرا السيد الرئيس.
Thank you, President. We'd like to welcome the Qatari delegation and we commend efforts made for the preparation of the report and also to establish good cooperation with UN mechanisms. We have taken note of Qatar's report and took part in the UPR review of Qatar. We would like to congratulate Qatar for its commitment to achieving sustainable development. We commend the fact that Qatar's government has accepted the recommendations that were presented by Oman regarding women's empowerment, regarding ensuring rights for all and access to medical care for all. We wish Qatar every success in the implementation of our recommendations and we recommend the Council adopt the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Mr. President, Pakistan thanks the State of Qatar for presenting a follow-up on recommendations received during their 4th UPR. It is commendable that Qatar has accepted majority of the recommendations, including those made by Pakistan. We appreciate the steady progress made on several facets of human rights, including its cooperation with the HRC, UPR mechanisms, special procedures, and the treaty bodies. We also welcome Qatar's efforts to protect and promote human rights, especially in the fields of women empowerment, gender equality, rights of children, right to education, and others. We wish Qatar every success in the implementation of accepted recommendations and request the Council to adopt the UPR outcome report with consensus. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation warmly welcomes the esteemed delegation of Qatar to the adoption of its 4th UPR cycle outcome report. We commend Qatar for its constructive engagement in the UPR process and for supporting recommendations presented by the Philippines to further enhance mechanisms to combat trafficking in persons, including access to remedy and support services for victims, and to continue to ensure effective enforcement of labor laws and address gaps where they exist. Mr. President, the Philippines is pleased to recommend the adoption of the UPR outcome report on Qatar and extends its best wishes to Qatar for the successful implementation of all accepted recommendations. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, President. The Russian delegation welcomes Doha's 4th Universal Periodic Review. We thank the delegation of Qatar for the information provided on the recommendations which were submitted. We note that most of them were accepted, including the Russian ones. This clearly demonstrates Qatar's commitment to promoting and protecting human rights and that Qatar is prepared to further cooperate with the international monitoring mechanisms. We particularly note the importance that Doha gives to international cooperation to promote and protect human rights and a responsible approach to participate in the human rights mechanisms of the United Nations and the major contribution made to these bodies. Qatar has made major progress in the human rights sphere, in particular in promoting and protecting the rights and freedoms of human beings and the empowerment of women, and we wish the government of Qatar further success along this path. The Russian Federation recommends adoption of the outcome document on the 4th UPR cycle of Qatar. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Saudi Arabia. Microphone for Saudi Arabia.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. يسرني أن أتقدم.
President, first and foremost, I wish to thank the head of the delegation from Qatar for the report and update which demonstrates the firm commitment of this country to promote and protect human rights, and which has enlightened us as to Qatar's position on the recommendations made. This also demonstrates the spirit of cooperation that Qatar has to work